Good evening to everybody, unless you're on the West Coast, in which case it's a lovely afternoon, 5 p.m. We at the Wits Fund, John Teager is here, Cliff McMillan, Taboho Moja, Indran, these are all members of the board. Wits Fund was created to help support the university, give a way for its alumni to stay connected to the university itself and also to each other and to create those communities and connections with each other. And one of the ways that we do that is that we host regular Indabas, and sometimes they're interactive. Bring your drink and tells a story, and sometimes they're taking advantage of having somebody from Wits itself coming to share their expertise with us. And so is the case today. When Khosi Radebe wrote to me to say, I'm coming to present a paper in New York, do you have any advice? The first thing I said, well, we'd love to hear what your topic is and hear more from you at the Indaba. And so really thank you for giving us the opportunity to have your insights and your expertise on this call. And also, of course, help us to think through some of these thorny issues. And then once I had Khosi on the line and the hook, I was able to reach out to Pola, who I know from a visit to Austin, Texas, and that was I think a couple of years ago, and we've stayed in touch and stayed friends, and she's just a really impressive person and has the kind of background to help us understand the topic. And so to her, thank you so much as well. And so let me just start the as they say, the proceedings and let you know that the conversation today is between Khosi and Pola. Khosi is a senior lecturer. She's Dr. Khosi Radebe, a senior lecturer at the business school at Wits. She holds her doctorate from the Paris School of Business, and her research has been focused on strategic management, entrepreneurship, innovation, and business models. And she's widely published in international journals and contributed to academic books. Pola, who is also a Witsi, she earned her BSc with honors in actuarial science at Wits, and her MBA from the London Business School. And she is an executive and strategic advisor, management consulting, founder-led growth in environments across Joburg, London, Austin, and so I am really grateful to you both for giving us your time and your energy. And I'm going to hand over to Pola and let you get on with our conversation for the evening.
Thank you very much, Khosi, for being here with us today. It is a real privilege to have met with you already in our preparations. Privilege of reading your work. It's such a fascinating topic. It sounds a little scary when you read the title of what we're talking about: safeguarding society, the age of AI, lessons from the G20, and African mining. And it took me a minute to wrap my head around it, but I thought this really is a fascinating. And I'm just going to start with a little bit of an intro, and then I want the majority of the conversation to be led by Khosi, but we're in a really interesting space for Africa right now as a whole. So part of that. We have these technological advances in the form of AI, and energy independence, and all of them rely on something that's only recently really come into the fore of mind, and that's critical minerals, right? It's cobalt, platinum, manganese. This is more than ever needed in the demand is skyrocketing. Where are these? They live mostly in Africa, right? And that looks like a really incredible opportunity, but time again we've seen the resource, the who have these incredible assets, but they're just not able to monetize them. And so Africa is sitting on the ability to we've all had this incredible opportunity that 4 years or 4 terms in a row we've had developing countries be the presidencies of the G20 forefront agenda has been developing countries and countries, right? AI and AI governance in front of countries develop, and making equality, using AI to equality for developing countries. And in particular, in this G20, this last G20 in South Africa, we really focused on the energy transition. And there's a focus on critical minerals, there's a focus on creating education and educating 1 million people in Africa. And what they've said is that it's the opportunity to build factories, create skilled jobs, really empower the continent and give it what it needs. And then we're on the other side where we've got AI enabling this, but we've got everyone talking about how AI is going to take jobs away. And so we're in this interesting situation where there's a huge amount of opportunity, but there's so much that's unknown, so much that is scary. And I would like to start looking at the critical minerals and the mining industry as a whole. Khosi, you've described in your work that mines are often laggards to innovation. This is an incredible, but they'll have to step up. How do you see the opportunity for the mining sector as a whole?
Right. Thank you, Pola, for that introduction and background that has been laid. Evening, colleagues. My name indeed is Khosi Radebe, here on a visit. Looking forward to spending time tonight with yourselves. So in terms of research, as Nushin has introduced me, I'm 4 years into academia and being a researcher, so it became pertinent to me to find a niche already, because a lot of things obviously have been researched, so you just want to find yourself a niche. So one of the critical things for me, which at that time it wasn't as prevalent as now, was to adopt the innovation part of it within a sector that, as Paula has said, it's viewed as being laggard, right? So that being laggard, does it mean now then innovation does not exist at all? But that also then, it's a study that I had done for my PhD, read some literature review around 2017, 2018. And I realized when I started publishing that, a lot of the journals are actually asking the same thing, to say, so why the mining sector regarding innovation? Because it's particularly slow in that area. So when I collected my data in Botswana, it's called Botswana, which is one of the largest diamond producers in the world, with the precious diamond mine. And what I found there was that it may be laggard in general as an industry, but particularly they were doing quite amazing work in Botswana. Particularly also what I was testing there was the existence of a department or a person or people that were called intrapreneurs, which are the innovators within the mining sector. And I found that even though they were not calling them or terming them as intrapreneurs, but they were in existence. And so that term came because I studied in Europe for my PhD, and it was a term that was very popular and commonly used. But, in Africa, you'd find that we were a little bit shy or not even knowledgeable about it. So in regards, Paula, to the mining sector and innovation, what is happening around there, I had a conversation with a mining friend, and I was asking exactly the same thing, that, having started this journey of innovation in your sector about 7-8 years ago, what's the stance now? Would you say that it has advanced the right direction? And then he was of the opinion that, because he's in practice, right? He was of the opinion that, well, he would still view innovation as being laggard within the sector particularly. Then obviously it then just depends within particular or individual companies. Then I had a different view based on my readings now. So it's more like practice against, theory, because the theory now is saying within the mining sector particularly, it used to be known, of course, as the extractive industry, and it still stands. That's fundamental to the sector, right? However, it is slowly gravitating towards being a data, sort of like a data center sort of type of a business, and then also within the tech space. So we would probably at some point in time gravitate a little bit away from being core extractive to moving away to being, concentrating the mining sector in as far as data is concerned, in as far as tech is concerned. But I suppose then that's the difference between what is in theory and what exactly is happening in practice. So just to paint the picture then, Paula, back to your question, it will be a matter of innovation is there, it's happening, and they are benefiting out of it the way they should in terms of what are the benefits of innovation. However, from those that are in practice, they still deem it as being laggard as an industry.
In different ways, right? You can innovate in terms of it. I mean, if we look at your gorgeous background, which is up a lot of what we're talking about today, there's from the perspective of exploration, from the perspective of technology to extract. There's also innovation about an organization, right? How you make decisions. And I think this is how AI in part can help. I mean, AI can definitely help with large data sets and help decide where to explore, where to how deep to go, etc. Is it really technology that drives innovation, though? And you wrote a really interesting paper on this. Is it technology innovation within a company?
Technology alone, I would say not, just as a straight answer, but of course one would need to motivate that. Technology as a tool, I would see it as a driver to change, right? It would not directly having a technology in a company that determines the success of the company. However way you measure success, whether it's financially or qualitatively, however way you measure success, having technology would not directly then say, this company is successful. It's a number of things. There's a paper I think you're referring to, that strategic foresight of being within the sector, particularly with the interface with SMMEs and innovation. And what one found in that paper particularly is that, and also in practice, having spoken to people in the industry, is the fact that technology still requires human interface to a large degree, right? So you can buy and have all the tools. You can even have the best softwares, come up with the right systems, come up with the right processes, but it still requires, still to this date, human interface, human touch. So what are we saying? It's still very pertinent that we have an inclusion of the human factor in a number of ways. That human element is still very pertinent, because what I was testing in that paper, I remember there were a number of variables. There was organizational culture to it. There was environmental scanning, scenario planning, and the results showed that, all these aspects of organizational culture, environmental scanning, scenario planning, out of those, organizational culture had the strongest relationship to the success of the business, of which what was measured was using financial performance. So that organizational culture has to do with human factor, right? It's got nothing to do with a machine. It's not directly a technology, but it's human factor, and having a conducive environment in terms of that organizational culture that would then lead to financial performance, which is one of the success measures you would measure a company. So basically we're saying you can have all your tools and your processes in place, but they don't really drive direct outcome. However, human humans are the ones that drive companies into success through a number of things, which can include organizational capability that needs to be empowered and imparted to these individuals, right? And I think that then also leads me to speak specifically about the DCT, which is the Dynamic Capabilities Theory. When talking about organizational capability, it links directly to that, because fundamental to that theory, of course, it's got those three sub levels of, you need to sense the environment to see if there's any change that is almost about to happen. And we're speaking the era of AI, of course, there's something happening in the environment. Then you need to seize the opportunity. You can't just sit back and not do anything about it. You need to seize the opportunities by resourcing it, capacitating the environment, and then then undergo reconfiguration, transformation as an organization. But where DCT works is exactly in an environment that is undergoing change, that is not static, something that is really changing at any point in time. It can go either way. So essentially, during that change, what we're saying is what then becomes important is not a technology. However, it's the culture of the organization, the leaderships of the organizations, and the capabilities, amongst other things. So in essence, technology directly, Pola, would not lead to a success of an organization, but that human element becomes pertinent still.
That you can have all the tools you want, but unless you have the people using them properly, and even if you've got the right, really, from how you invent a culture. And I mean that your was very, very high. It was like, right? Culture is a driver of financial performance, and culture isn't an AI. Give you the information, people on board, give them the right environment to work on. And I love that, people are saying that AI will be taking humans out of the. What you're saying is we need humans. It's not just tech that runs it. You need humans there to help make the decisions, to use that data, to use the technology to make the right decisions. Is it safe to say that you think that is to what extent do you think jobs are at risk in the mining industry? I mean, if people are really important, have you seen any numbers, or do you have any inkling of how much is at risk with AI coming in?
I would not have the stats as is now, but I've got evidence from people in the industry. Comfortably, they said there is absolutely not. There is no any issues around the skill set and the people and the human factor within the industry. We're still very comfortable. And then I prompted the question more to say, but let's look at it now in reality. Something or any work that was done by an individual, now it's done by some tool of some sort. Some drones which were operated by someone, now the drones are able to just you operate from your office. So 5 people on the ground, now it's operated by 1 person. Is that not displacing people? And they said, quite frankly, not. However, though, it may be viewed depending on which level of the organization you are at.
Yeah.
Most of the mining companies, particularly where I went in personally to collect data, you'd find that the people that work in those organizations are people that came in at intern level. So it's people that have been in the organization for over 40 years. They grew up within the organization. So that was like 1970 or so, 1980. They are here now, but the era now has changed. Do they have the capability to work with AI and anything that is computerized in technology? You might find that not. And then also we have an understanding, as you all know, that within the mining sector, there's that huge skill set disparity. There's a lot of what we call general laborers, who are the ones that really go down to extract the minerals. And then you've got the educated people, of course, the mining engineers, civil engineers, sitting at another level. So depending on which level you are at, you'd find that those that I may deem or call the educated ones, the learned ones, that have an understanding that actually I don't have to stand up 10 times to check the gauge. I need to put a tool there that will check and say, okay, cool, something's going to happen to this. So then, it assists them instead of just doing that manual unrelated work, and they can really concentrate on that which is important to them. So they don't have a problem with incorporating AI of any kind because they understand that it assists with efficiency and being productive in that way. Then you have the laborers, the general laborers on the ground that are driving a truck, like you have on my background. Instead of a person driving a truck now it's automated, so they do feel displaced. So that's a mindset thing, though. That's really a mindset thing, where then my conversation around that is, then people need to undergo change management, where they're educated and informed. What exactly is this AI? How are you supposed to use AI for your benefit, right? So to a large degree, then what I'm trying to say is, even though in the absence of stats at this present moment that I'm speaking now, however, comfortably so, people that are in the industry comfortably state that there is no displacement whatsoever. People just need to be educated around this. And just to extend a little bit, I find it quite interesting when talking about AI, because then ahead I'm just thinking that it looks as if HR is going to be of the most important departments in an organization in terms of this change that everyone is going through. Because we're talking about, at some point you might say, so what's the solution to this? I mean, obviously then it will displace people if people still remain stagnant and at the level they are at. So I'm saying then, of course, people must be reskilled. Aspect of reskilling or learnings and development of people sits with HR. Training people sits with HR. Change management to ensure there's trust in the organization sits with HR. Resistance to change as well sits there. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, cool. This makes new sense now, to say then HR becomes one of those strategic divisions and departments in an organization. So to ensure that, you know, that skill set is maintained, it's upgraded where necessary, redeployed, you know, but HR becomes pertinent. So indeed, I would say no, there would not be an issue in regards to, you know, people losing jobs. Maybe just to also then add on that, I saw my colleague who is there, she's also from South Africa and has a sense of this, to say, in regards to the regulations of South Africa in particular, they are very, very, very stringent, very, very tight. It would not be easy to just get rid of people simply because now you say it's this automation. I mean, obviously, machines work 24 hours, so now you're displacing people because you've got something that becomes more productive. It doesn't work like that. Firstly, so the labor laws of South Africa I think, would definitely still protect the skills and the human beings within that sector. And then also, the regulations and the policies in general in South Africa are good enough to protect the individuals. Plus, I wanted to mention the other aspect of stakeholder, which you mentioned in your introduction. Particularly in South Africa, the unions are very active. So there's no room really for employers and companies to easily just say, okay, cool, from this to that, off we move. And it doesn't work like that. Per my previous point, that technology would not displace the human factor. So that would need to really be done in a very strategic way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess there are other stakeholders as well, right? There's the community. There's all sorts of stakeholders that you need to bring on board. You can't just make a decision overnight. I mean, when it comes to this automation, I guess specifically thinking of the kind of the manual laborers that you were talking about, the industry is really skewed towards men. I think one of your studies, me only had about 13% of the labor force in the mining company that you looked at being female. And I guess automation, does that open up the sector, like where there is automation and you can skill someone up and they don't need to be carrying 150 kilograms of a ground 4 kilometers, they can run things. Do you think that this is opening up the industry to women as well, to come in and be able to maybe learn new and maybe make it a more equal industry overall?
That's a very interesting one to think about, because I would say then my opinion on that would be probably there'd be a lot more disparities and more of an unequal society in regards to the gender, in regards to the education level, in regards to a number of things. I think it would be even more unequal in that sense, because of course we were still dealing with the fact that it's a mainly dominated industry. So all these past years, the Department of Labor, and what is it? The Act of Employment Equity, sorry, Act is one of the acts that are very prominent to ensure that there is equal aspects of things in different companies. So whilst we're dealing with that, now comes, AI. And I think, of course, in terms of the gender, females would probably continue to be disadvantaged. People of certain educational levels, so those educational gaps would be more prominent as well. So that in unequal society, I think it would be something that would probably be vastly in existence now, of which now it opens up another gap. That is something then government would need to work through around the policies framing in order to ensure that we close the gap. So it's as if when you're closing one thing, the other thing continues. And I think for me, that's why I just really appreciate being in the business environment, because nothing is static, nothing remains the same for the longest time. And it's all about evolution at all times, which is why then being a strategist, it becomes quite interesting these days, because you always need to think about what's the next plan, what is potentially going to happen, And I think there's room for of course, government to lead the conversations. There's room for consultants, strategists to come up with better ways of how then that can be mitigated. And it really calls for everybody involved to ensure that they sit on the table and discuss these things. I think inclusive discussion is one of the ways that we can make sure that we close the gap. But more than anything, then of course, if we've got a policy that will police these aspects, we'll just need to make sure that from a government perspective, that is done. But I must say that I think honestly, government is trying its best, is doing quite a lot in that regard. Like I said, speaking of the regulations, particularly within this sector, they are quite stringent. So very strict around that. So I think government is ensuring, remember, government sets the tone and the rules and the policies, and people then need to ensure that they're implemented and guard against that. So that's the part that we need to make sure it's done correctly. But if I can add as well, I mean, things like social labor plan within the sector becomes important. And those are one of the licenses that you cannot operate in the sector unless you have an SLP. So an SLP as well has to do with the numbers, right? How many women, community involvement, and all the stakeholders that are involved. So those are the things that really get to be looked at. So even if one may think that because of the era we live in, there's inequality, you can't justify an SLP that says these are the targets, these are the numbers you need to meet, and you say, but because of the era we're in, I couldn't hire more women. You have to go out there, look for those particular people.
And if you can't find them, then upskill them, right? You've got to you work. From you is it's a lot to do. It's a lot to do with government regulation and getting all stakeholders in and really giving deep thought in terms of how to be more inclusive. It's about creating that protect people, right? And again, we keep coming back to the protection of people, how important people are, and it's not just about the technology; it's about the people, really. I know you do a lot of work in entrepreneurship, and I'd love to. It's a little bit of a step aside. My ultimate question will be: SMMEs drive a portion of the economy overall. They create a huge amount of employment. Everyone always thinks about corporates, the big corporates of the world in South Africa, the Anglo, the big banks, etc. But a huge percentage of people are employed by SMMEs, and there's a huge amount of value in the economy out of SMMEs. My ultimate question will be, how do we get SMMEs into the critical mineral supply chain in South Africa? And ultimately, I want to follow up with finding out how to support them. But way so that people understand how involved you are in entrepreneurship, how involved you are with SMMEs. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do with SMMEs and specific work?
Right, thank you. So WEC is an acronym. It's WEC. It stands for Wits Entrepreneurship Clinic. It is under the School of Business Sciences, Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management. I am the director of the clinic. This is my tenure now. And so what we do essentially is to empower entrepreneurs, right? within the bracket of SMMEs, and I think probably this side is called MSME, but in South Africa we just call it the SMME, which is small, micro, medium entrepreneurs, right? So what we do is to ensure that we prepare them through different programs, whether it's an incubation program, whether it's customized programs, and then they undergo training per the need that they have. And usually we would train a grouping of entrepreneurs. So we'd go into, so the entrepreneurs would find that because they're SMMEs, we are in the city, yes, but we essentially target entrepreneurs that we would call marginalized entrepreneurs. So rural entrepreneurship is key. Township entrepreneurs are the ones that we deal with. Female and women-owned entrepreneurs are the ones that we would essentially be the ones that we assist. In terms of the model is we go out, look for funding, get the funding, and then go out there and deliver our services, which include training and facilitation for the entrepreneurs. It includes mentoring and coaching and business support in general, business consulting. So what we do is just to empower them to move from informal trading to formal trading by educating them really what are the benefits of being a formal trader, which includes, for example, working with government and partaking in the tender system of South Africa. So we work with those and we see quite a lot of impact in regards to, I mean, these are the people that become entrepreneurs not by virtue of a choice, by virtue of circumstance. What do I mean by that is there is a lady that has finished matric, absolutely nothing else to do, no money to go to university. And because they're in the rural setting, there's not even a lot of jobs there, very limited job scope. So it is either they stay at home or they go on the other side of the law, right? And do all sorts of things. So besides that, then the only option that stands there between them and surviving is entrepreneurship, which is where then we come in to say, let us empower you. You may not have the capacity to go to university or the means to go to university, but here we are, and we literally just leave the city, travel 4 hours every 2 weeks, for example, to run that program. So that's how we involved with entrepreneurship, and it's really gaining a lot of momentum in South Africa. You have a lot of people that are requesting just to come in, particularly because our offering is customized to the needs of the client. In this instance, we call them a client even though they're not paying clients, right? But it's clientism because we service them. So that's getting a lot of momentum in that regard, that a lot of times you'd find that there's entrepreneurship centers, clinics, or incubation centers, you'd find that they've got standard programs that then the entrepreneur, in terms of their problems, need to fit into what the offerings of the center are. But with us, it's different in that way. We are fluid because we understand that not all entrepreneurs fit into one box. So within the mining sector, of course, they play a critical role in as far as the value chain is concerned. Number one, it is a requirement in our country that I think now it is probably in most sectors, because I know it's in the construction sector as well, that when you get a project, you need to use the community members. So in the community, there are people that have all the equipment that you may need. So you need to give at least maximum 30% of the work scope to the people of the community. And in the community, that's where our type of entrepreneurs are, which are the SMMEs. Even within our tendering system, the tenders themselves, right there, they ask, so who are you going to empower with this tender? Give us a portion, explain. And I think when they do their adjudication, they look and consider that. So, I mean, that then is one of the ways where I still say then government is really, really doing a lot in this regard, right? In these conversations where it might not really be seen outright, but they're really doing the type of work they're supposed to do in terms of supporting the larger population. So in that way, because the tender system stipulates that you need to give certain work to the community, hence then that would be part of how entrepreneurs come into playing into bigger projects in that way. And also what we're talking about there is the transfer of skill in that way, because here you are working with a WHO, big construction company, and you're a little company there, and you're going to learn from them. So that exchange of skills, exchange of knowledge, being capacitated in that way becomes very important for the people that are coming from the community. And within the mining sector, then definitely, as we have mentioned, that stakeholder engagement and the key stakeholders, one of them being the community, is very critical. You do not involve the community. You do not hire people from the community. That project will stall. It will not move. So in that way, then that's one of the ways to ensure that you don't give people money, but you empower people for tomorrow when you leave as a company.
Incredible. To the regulation, right? Because this would only be possible with a regulation in place. If you were the South African government advice on the important thing that you think that they need to get right in terms of the G20 legacy that they've left, focusing on critical minerals, trying to create value within the country, and incorporating AI into it, what advice would you give them? There's regulation in place. Some people would say that it's overregulated, that it doesn't, that it's not. Some people would say that it's not commercial because there's such a focus on SMMEs. There's so much regulation and it's regulated. There's always going to be those people. What's the advice that you would give the South African government?
I'm wearing my hat as President Ramaphosa's advisor right now. Oh, okay. I think that aspect of beneficiation comes into fore for me. You touched on the G20. The declarations are there, but we need to then make sure that we operationalize that for the benefit of the people, say the people of South Africa in this instance.
Yeah.
I think then it will then become important then that the government of South Africa comes up with enabling or adaptive policies for that matter. If you don't have the right support from government in the form of regulations, support of laws and the policies, then we stagnate because it starts there and it stops there in terms of the buck. So enabling and adaptive policies will need to be hastened. I think we are a couple of months post the G20. So, I mean, what's the action on the ground, right? I would think then government as well, we need to come up with capability development strategies in line with exactly the deliverables or the outcomes of the G20. I would speak also in ensuring that they ensure for the benefit of South Africa at a very high level for that matter that they form strategic partnerships within Africa, because it's quite important that we need to have regional coordination. G20 is at a global stage, but bringing it home in Africa, what is happening? What's the conversation? For the longest time in Africa, it's been a matter of the argument has been we need to stop over relying on the West on anything, even the implementation of things. Like it's as if people cannot really. I just want to find a right way of saying it. We need to be able as Africa to just do things on our own, basically.
Grip of the West on Africa.
We should be self-sustaining. We should be self-sufficient by ensuring that we move from the south to the north to Egypt, we move across to the west to Nigeria and Ghana, move across to Ethiopia. Because if we have that inclusive partnerships, and those are very strategic partnerships, right? I mean, I love the movement by people like Mr. Aliko Dangote. He's coming out and he's ensuring that he makes sure that he's out there to ensure that he advances Africa, not just Nigeria. He's coming down to Zimbabwe, met the president, having conversations around infrastructure, and there's so many people like him. Your Mutsipe as well, Dr. Mutsipe is going up north and advocating, good conversation. So that cross partnerships across Africa is very important for Africa. So that is important, and I think they are on the right track though in terms of infrastructure. South Africa has one of the best infrastructures. Of course, then with our internal domestic issues, we just need to make sure that then we maintain those infrastructures. So yeah, that it would really be around beneficiation aspects of things to say, let us be practical about things now. And ensure that a plan has been set, the commitments have been set by the G20, but they cannot really, honestly, we're asking for too much now. If we need them to come in and implement for us, we should then just advance ourselves, knock on the doors. If we need subsidies, I'm pretty sure they'd be willing to assist here and there, and we really just make it work for our people, not only for South Africa, but for Africa at large.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the not quite complaints, but it was a criticism of what the G20 came up with, because it didn't really focus on connectedness of Africa. It was very much a declaration on what should be happening, but it didn't really talk about how does Africa work together. And I love that because people talk about Africa as a continent when it is so diverse, where people talk about the individual countries and you get these kind of regional areas, but how do we bring that whole continent together? I think it's a tricky one, right? But I love that that's it's about saying, okay, how do we maintain this value? How do we keep the value? You know, how do we really make ourselves independent, right? I think a lot of the minerals is the resource curse again is exporting raw materials. That's in the refinement. Their value sits in really making something valuable and not just exporting rock out of the country, but really creating a lot of on the continent by moving those industrial processes of refinement. One of the criticisms of the G20, always criticisms, but the World Trade Organization has its own rules about that, and it really blocks Africa's ability to resources onshore until they've really taken value out of that. Do you have any thoughts on that in terms of, I mean, that nothing binding has come out of the G20. No, there's frameworks, but we're still kind of bound by organization rules. Do you have any thoughts on the whole? How could we get around that? How do we bring the value creation back onto the continent?
Right, that's a very interesting.
Debswana, interestingly, was very interesting because Debswana actually, and I don't know how they did this, but Debswana used to export the raw diamond, but then they actually started bringing that onshore. And I remember flying to Botswana many, many times and seeing diamond traders flying into Debswana. Maybe you could answer the question, and then we'll get to Bogo to join in the conversation.
Okay, it's me first or the Bogo first?
You're our speaker.
Okay. So when I was in Debswana at that particular time, and I'm going to speak to that in reference to what is happening now. At that time, one of their biggest challenges, and particularly that company, it was Joining Mine. That's where I was. The issue. Huh?
I've been to Joining.
Oh yes, Joining. Yeah, it was Joining Mine. Awesome, small little town, but doing exceptionally well. GDP contribution to Botswana is huge. What was happening is with those synthetic diamonds, they were coming into fall. So it was a matter of they were undergoing cost-cutting measures as a business because the synthetic diamonds were new and they were robust in terms of disrupting the industry. But I think what they did is just to continue being who they were, right? Extracting diamonds the way they did, even though then it became a little bit expensive compared to the others. But then as a client, it also then depends what it is that you want. You can get synthetic if you want synthetic or pure diamonds mined according to the safety guidelines of world standards in the world. So they remained, and from what I hear at this point in time is that industry of synthetic diamonds is growing. People are even more receptive of it in terms of the customers. So then in the probably last year, the new president, Boko, was having issues around how there needs to be a plan, right, in Botswana in regards to, the synthetic diamonds and the diamonds they have. So it's a bit of, I think, shaky period of time for Botswana. You would know that, other than agriculture, the diamond sector, mineral sector is like contributing massively to the employment Botswana people as well as to the GDP. So it cannot afford as a country that they need to, not perform well in that regard. So I think they're coming up with strategies. One of the strategies was to work with, I forgot the other African country, but they are sort of like facing the similar programs with regards to diamonds. So they are coming together, and I felt like, okay, cool. At least there's a good plan around it. So maybe what you then speaking to would be one of the plans that Botswana is really deciding on, because something needs to be done. And that's why I keep saying, that's the thing with business. You are a pioneer in the industry now, you're leading the game. Next thing tomorrow, something else is coming in. You just quickly need to gather yourself and find out what you can do best out of that situation. That's how I can respond to at this point in time. Maybe we can bring Tebogo.
Yeah, let's hear what you got to say, Tebogo.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for this conversation. And as I'm listening to it, there's so many issues that are coming in my mind. And one of them is environmental sustainability. And with that, I was traveling now and passed through Ghana. So illegal mining in Ghana that has sort of polluted one of the big rivers so much that it's no longer usable. It's gold in color from gold mining and all. And I'm wondering how we can use in the mining industry AI to balance efficiency with environmental sustainability and also address issues of social justice. There's illegal mining because people are poor, people need to eat, all kinds of social issues that are leading to that. So is there a place for AI to be governed in a way that it can help us sort of balance those things?
That's a very interesting observation, Tebogo. Thank you for that contribution. The story of illegal mining in South Africa is even political to some degree, if not a large degree, because there's so many things that I said around that to such an extent that if you're from South Africa, or just to paint a little bit of a picture there, it's that, it's there's certain industries that you can't touch in a legal way. Through regulations and stuff. For example, the taxi industry, however way they operate, we all shy about it. We all speak in harsh voices about it, and we leave it. So is illegal mining. We call them the zamazamas, right? We call them the zamazamas, and infiltrated by people that are coming from Lesotho. And when there's conversations that are rising around it, little bit linked to politics, politicians linked exactly still to the mining companies themselves. So it then becomes dead confusing. But we cannot then leave it at that. Tebogo, you're quite right. We cannot leave it at that to say, oh, well, it's one of the industries or aspects of the economy we can't really touch, when what then happens if it gets to, the level what is happening in that Ugandan river, so we need to find ways as a country. And is there a role in AI at a very high level without even going deep into the details? My stance is, AI cuts across everywhere. So if the solution would be AI over and above, what else can be done in terms of policing that sector in regards to the zamazamas? I would say if there's any way around AI, there should be ways, because one of the things then that was said is, because these are people that in actual fact they do come up with the minerals, right? It's just that they get it in other ways that is against the law. So how about, it was one of the I think one of the advisors at some point in time to say, why don't you upskill these people and put them into mainstream work of mining, because they do come up with the minerals with their limited resources, right, in the dangerous places that they work in. I don't know what happened to those conversations. Like I'm saying, it's just those conversations that don't really come into the formal structures of South Africa per se, because then it's going to be an issue with regards to the environmentalists and the environment at large. So if there's any way, Tebogo, for AI to play a role, I think really it can assist. And like I'm saying, from a very high level, I would say that AI cuts across, and that can be something that really, I suppose, the mining companies and the right stakeholders would really need to consider and look at.
Great question. Are there any other questions actually while we're at it? Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that, typical. I think it's a tricky one, right? The G20 has actually said one of the they put forward is 1 million people in Africa. I think on AI. 1 million in a billion people is a drop in the ocean, you know. 1 million people, as we know, the network effect in Africa, people can raise up multi-million people, right? Because they can then educate their children. They can bring their communities up and teach their communities better. So I think that's one way to look at it. Is maybe it's not about everyone and bringing everyone up, but educating enough people to get them to lift everyone else up as well. The tool, maybe it's the AI. And I mean, coming from an environmental perspective, I'm working in the water industry. One of my hats is in the water. There are some incredible globally. There's one project in particular in India, the Ganges River, that it basically was dead water. And a friend of mine has actually worked on a project using multiple different techniques to actually clean up the Ganges River. And I think that is not just about stopping, it's also about using AI to clean up rivers, find out where the sources of the pollution are, finding solutions as to how to clean the up, as well as then creating opportunities for people and educating people to lift them up. And I think, Khosi, your concept of these people are, maybe they're doing it in a dodgy way, but they are able to, on their very, very limited resources, able to extract value. And I think it's in our human nature that we're productive with our lives, right? So if we pick up on those two factors, if we give them the right tools and give them opportunities, I think anyone would jump at that, or most people would jump at that. So I love that. I love that question. Because we were all, I have had the best time talking to you. Such interesting answers. Is there any takeaway that you want to leave us with? A sentence or two that kind of wraps up where you see things going, what you're excited in the industry, maybe about what you're working on next?
All right, so 1 or 2, maybe it'll be 3 or 5 closing remarks. Yeah, but I think for me it's very exciting in regards to AI. Here is a student of mine that is doing his PhD, and I find the topic quite interesting. He is a robotics engineer for the Reserve Bank, so he does he comes up with robots to solve the operational solutions of the Reserve Bank. And what he's saying, though, is his argument now is he is seeing quite a lot of skill set displacement, in the sense that a lot of people are over relying on AI. So his research is on over reliance of AI, coming up with a framework to say people should watch out and look for things around, ensuring that they don't become over reliant on AI. He's a robotics person. He comes up with the robots himself because that's his job, but he's saying, whoa, wait a minute, human factor, can you please bring yourselves back? It's quite important that you do not rely too much on this new AI era. And I think that that's what I would say in terms of what one is interested in, to say, whilst AI is good and all well and fair, people should not be redundant now. Suddenly you can't type an email. You can't write a good quality letter all of a sudden, because now you're like, ChatGPT, please check it for me quickly. Because now we fall short of in terms of our capabilities, we fall short of ensuring that we're not as capable or challenging our minds, because even these AIs, is it not that people behind it? So we all need to at all times become smart, and challenge ourselves mentally. So that over-reliance of AI is a problem. So in terms of that skill set and ensuring that we're still capable is probably one of the areas one would look at. So, but in general, of course, for me, I would say AI is in all sectors, is in every way. It cuts across, like I have said before. So there is no way you can say in your sector, at least it's not affecting you. So it's one of the most important, if not conversations that need to be at the tip of our hands, just to think around it, to say, how can I capacitate myself more with this AI? I mean, for me, I'll speak of myself from a professional perspective. I'm a business strategist, but I realized that just being a basic business strategist in this era is not helping. Had to go back to class, and now I've positioned myself as a data-driven business strategist, because I realized, you know what, I need to add some AI to this, and data being the other important assets after human, not even after, with human beings. We'll see with time what happens. Maybe data will overtake human beings, which is what then this conversation was about today, to say human factor is still very important. But if AI really takes over to the fifth, sixth IR, what really is going to happen? You might find that data becomes very pertinent and key. Hence, then for me, that positioning to say, you know what, whilst all of this is happening, it's important that, like we're saying, reskill, upskill ourselves in order to make sure that we're all ready for this generation. And then also, really, we'll just leave it to, I don't know, the policymakers and be part of the conversations continuously. Thank you, Pola, colleagues.
Such a pleasure, everyone who has been on this call. Thank you, Nushin. Thank you, Indran, for arranging this. This has really been a highlight of my week, and I've learned a tremendous amount, and I'm very grateful for everyone being here to mention. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.